go into your book, The Financial Tsunami. Will it drown us in a wave of debt? Do you think it will drown us in a wave of debt?
Well, I think we certainly have the potential to do that if we continue doing what we're doing, and as the American public can see with what's going on in Washington right now, we're actually doing nothing except pointing fingers and going back and forth. I don't think that you can continue to spend in excess of what you make, be it as an individual or a country, for an extended period of time without having a train wreck. I mean, basically, the government is using their home equity line, if you will, to make their house payment. And they've been doing that, and people have been willing to buy U.S. treasuries that are backed only by the full faith and credit of the United States government. And, to the extent that people start wondering, will the United States government have the ability to pay its obligations when they come due? A couple of things could happen. Number one, people stop buying those treasury instruments. Or secondly, they say, hey, we want a higher rate of return because we perceive that there's more risk. So, with that, comes more money and more outlays in the form of interest expense.
Right.
So, it's a very interesting situation, and I think it's quite a hurdle for the young generation to understand this and say, gosh, what's this mean to me? Well, what it means to me is that somebody's going to have to pay more taxes, and other people are going to see benefit levels reduced,
right?
So that these programs can continue, and the United States government can continue to meet its past obligations as well. Right.
Do you have any children, Mike?
I have 4.
You have 4 children?
I have 4 children, 4 great children, yeah.
Are they into this? Are they aware of the financial tsunami and particularly the unfunded liabilities?
They all have read my book.
Okay.
And, I think they understand it as well as anybody does. Will and I wrote this book, and the original book started off at 400 pages. And a gentleman by the name of Thomas Bowers, who is at Indiana, at the Kelly Graduate School, read it, and he said, this is great, but it's too long, so we rewrote it and got it down to about 125 pages. And basically, before you're finished with the chapter, you understand what's going on, and we get you through the chapter before boredom sits in. So that's the real key. This is not something that a lot of people have an interest in at this particular point in time. I think that they certainly will, as it impacts the masses. I mean, we see what's going on in Greece today with the social and the political unrest over there, and I think as it impacts people, they'll try to understand it more. But we try to break this down into bite-sized components because it is not a sexy subject. It is a difficult subject, and there's a lot of moving parts to it. So we work to make the book easy to read, understandable, and probably the most interesting thing about the book and the comment that we get most often is, gosh, when I read it, I get it. And by the way, all of the references that we put in there, and every fact and figure that we put into the book comes from a government website. So this isn't Mike Gearhardt and Will Gates making up numbers. This is government information that's out there on the web for everyone to see. So it's out there, and they know about it. They just continue to ignore it. And just as a data point, I want to read you something that came from the 2009 GAO fiscal outlook. They do a long-term fiscal outlook, and in these long-term projections, they bake in these unfunded liabilities that they're going to have to fund. But they say that absent policies aimed at reforming the key drivers of the structural deficits, and they identify those as health care spending and Social Security, the federal government faces unsustainable growth in debt. They go on to say the longer the action to deal with the federal government's long-term fiscal outlook is delayed, the greater the risk that the eventual changes will be disruptive and destabilizing. And that's right out of a GAO report. So, when you look at that, you see, wow, these people know what's going on. They continue to sort of turn a blind eye. The Social Security trustee report put in a similar statement in their 2008 report, and they say that the financial condition of Social Security and Medicare programs remains challenging, and that the projected long-term costs are not sustainable under current parameters. So you have the Social Security Trust Fund issuing this report, and this report happened to be the first year that Timothy Geithner chaired that fund. So this is something that he read before it was published. So they put that out there, and it's buried in the middle of a 300-page report. All right. But they put that out there, and yet we have politicians saying anything to do with Social Security and Medicare are off the table. And we have the Social Security Trust Fund saying that the programs are not sustainable under current parameters. So it is somewhat amazing to me that anybody could recommend making a change to bring our fiscal house in order and totally ignore something that costs 54 to 55 cents of every dollar we spend, and that the trustees are telling the government leaders, hey, this can't go on.
Right.
Absolutely mind-boggling.
That's interesting, because it makes me wonder what value these words even have. If these words are coming directly from the Board of Trustees and the GAO, what value do their words really have, and what's happening? Well, what happens once they produce these reports?
Well, that's a great point. These reports are out there. They're for every citizen to see. I doubt if anyone has read these entire reports except Will Gates and Mike Gearhardt, but maybe the person that authored them. But that's exactly the point. You have very astute people doing very sophisticated financial modeling, dealing with facts, and putting different what-if scenarios in there, telling the politicians, here's what you have to do, and the politicians choose to ignore it. And the question has to be, why would they do that?
Right.
Well, there's really only one reason, and herein lies one of the large political problems we have today, and that is, if they go to the constituency and say, here's what we have to do, they run the risk of losing their job. And so we all know that the politicians of this country want to all be elected. That becomes their most important job once they're in office, to stay in office.
Right.
And, if they come out and tell the American public the truth and they take the actions to sort of rectify and deal with the problem, they're going to run the risk of losing their job. So, they choose to ignore it. They choose to grandstand. In the meantime, Joe Public really has no idea of how serious this problem is. And let me just give you an example of what I mean by that. Will and I have done well over 100 interviews since we published the book. And by the way, we published the book a year before the Japanese tsunami, so I don't want anyone to think that we're trying to trade on a faddish name here. But when during an interview, a gentleman said, I totally disagree with everything you're saying. All the government has to do is quit spending so much money, and they can solve this problem. Well, I'll give you a couple of data points. The deficit for this fiscal year is projected at $1.5 trillion. The United States government is going to spend approximately $700 billion on defense spending and another $600 billion on Social Security payments. So that's a sum of $1.3 trillion. So if we were to take both of those programs and get rid of them, completely eradicate defense spending, and completely stop all Social Security payments, we would still have a deficit of $200 billion. So, people that say, we can fix this quickly, really do not understand the numbers. They haven't spent any time understanding the numbers.
They're not even looking at the math.
They're not even looking at the very simple math that's behind this. Global war and terrorism. I've had people say, oh, gosh, the global war and terrorism, that's what's really run this deficit up. Well, when the global war on terrorism started, I believe the deficit was somewhere around the $5 trillion level. And if we look at it today, we're at the $14.5 trillion level. So we've got a delta of $9 trillion. And every report that I have read assigns a cost of the global war on terrorism between $1.1 and $1.5 trillion. So, okay, I'll give you the global war on terrorism cost you $1.5. Make it the biggest number. Where is the other $7.5 trillion? So, the global war on terrorism, that's not the root of this problem. And the people that say it is are kidding themselves. And again, I want to go back. The Social Security Trust Fund tells us what the problems are. Social Security and Medicare programs are not sustainable under current program parameters.
Right.
So, all of these things that people are talking about, the quick fix, it doesn't exist. The numbers are simply too large.